welcome to episode 8 of the Unbotchable podcast. I am your host, Bryant Niles, and today we're going to have a lot of great discussions. We're going to cover the second part of the 4-part Wrestling View series. We're going to have the first Wrestling Top 5 on this podcast, and as always, we're going to have the weekly Roundup. So let's not waste any more time and jump right into it. The next of my main wrestling views comes in the form of women's wrestling. Women's wrestling throughout time has been overlooked and underutilized in creative fashions as well as mainstream viewing. And I feel that if you have a strong women's division, whether that be singles division or a tag team division, it'll take your show and put it into a stratosphere that other shows aren't able to attain. Even in recent years, you've been able to see shows that have varying levels of women performers and quality of matches and dedication on the women's side. And as you look, even within the WWE itself, if you over last year, you looked at Monday Night Raw, which had all the main stars. It had everyone you would look for when you want to think of, the star powers of the women wrestling world. And then you would go over to SmackDown, and it had Charlotte Flair and occasionally Ronda Rousey, and that was almost pretty much it until, Liv Morgan made the switch from Raw to SmackDown to add some more firepower, and then at WrestleMania, Rhea Ripley went over before the draft to add more firepower. But even something like that, you can see how there was a discrepancy in women's wrestling and spotlight that was very obvious to see. Everyone would say that the women's division on SmackDown was never up to par with the women's division on Monday Night Raw that had Becky Lynch, Bianca Belair, Asuka, just to name a few of the stars that they had on the roster. In SmackDown, they barely had anything. They had Charlotte, and then they got Liv Morgan. Obviously last year with Sasha and Naomi leaving, which were obviously important pieces there on SmackDown. It left a big hole, and they weren't able to fill it until, just this past WWE draft, where now SmackDown and Raw both have equal amount of women's wrestling. But when you were watching the shows, you would notice the big hole that the women's division left on SmackDown. You were drawn more to the Raw side of things because it was a more complete show. I guess considering that Roman Reigns was the unified champion and mostly seen on SmackDown, I guess gave Raw a hole that they didn't have a world champion, and SmackDown didn't have a women's division, so I guess it might have evened out a little bit in terms of, what you're missing on each show. But, if you were to give, like, these current rosters, or not current rosters, but these current championship situations with each show having their own champion and whatnot, but you keep the roster that was from last year, you would 9 times out of 10, a person would side with Monday Night Raw over SmackDown just for the quality of the women's storylines that were on that show, the quality of the performers that were on that show. Everything about Monday Night Raw's women's division ran circles around the SmackDown women's division. And it took well over a year to finally even things out and make everything on par with each other. So, when I look at wrestling views, I came up in the era where it was the start of the transition to, women's evolution. It was the start of that. It was, when Paige came up and all those kind of new talents and new fire in the women's division. That's what I remember. I remember, a little bit when I would watch, I would say maybe 2010. There wasn't as much involvement for women's storylines. It was more of pieces into the men's storylines, which wasn't, ideal at all. And, their women's storylines were not as fleshed out as the men's were. Over time, when Paige came up, and then you had the horsewomen come up, you could see the change and transition from each step. And then the next step in is the women's tag division, which has been, pushed to the side. There's been a lot of work to try to get it back to where it's a respectable championship. They're unifying the titles. I think this week they're unifying the titles. So, maybe we'll get, maybe just a rebrand of the titles or something like that to just put a fresh face on the championships to maybe, I don't want to say undo the hardships that the titles have endured, but maybe to give the fans a different look that might make it easier for them to watch the title matches and root for the women's tag division rather than just not like it because that's the reason why Sasha Banks and Naomi aren't with the company anymore, which I feel like is a big role as to why people don't like the titles or put as much effort into it as they should. The creative team, they've been definitely trying a lot harder, you can see recently. So there's still more work to go. But as this is my second main wrestling view, I think it's very important that the women's division, no matter what company it is, no matter what other performers are on the roster or whatever championships there are available on that roster, that the women's wrestling is given an equal chance to shine compared to the men's championships wrestlers, because that's what we need. We need more women, more role models in wrestling that people can look up to. So I think that having this change and continuing to make the change is something that is going to benefit everyone in the long run. And that's why it is my number 2 wrestling view. Next week we will have number 3, which I'm not going to spoil what it is, of course, but it's going to be a good one. But now I want to jump into the first ever top 5 list on this podcast. For the first top 5 list, I wanted to pick a topic that had a lot of modern influence and decided to make it a top 5 most important factions in WWE history. With the recent implosion of the Bloodline, which we will get into later, I thought it was very timely, very also very important to talk about, as it sometimes gets talked about as best faction of all time. Who's the best faction? What faction is most important to wrestling history? And I'm going to cover that in my opinion. As a disclaimer, this is WWE factions. I am not including the NWO. Any factions that are not strictly in the WWE when they were formed and had their run. So at number 5, I have Evolution. Evolution, I gave them the edge just because of the members it had. It had Ric Flair, it had a young Randy Orton and Batista, and Triple H. The group dominated during their run. They had 5 total world championships, 2 tag team championships, 2 intercontinental championships, and Batista winning 1 Royal Rumble. That obviously helped launch the careers of Batista and most notably Randy Orton, who is, you might even consider the best wrestler in the group if you wanted to have that debate too. It helped him and Batista go into superstardom. It seems possible that even without Evolution, you might look at Randy Orton or Batista and they might be viewed in a different light than what they had if they weren't in this group. Maybe they never get that chance to shine or opportunity to show the world how great they are on a consistent basis with the support and eyes that Ric Flair and Triple H gave. So I think that Evolution as itself helped deliver the wrestling world Batista and Randy Orton in a way that made them both superstars and both 2 of the most influential wrestlers in modern history. Now at number 4, I have the New Day. I put the New Day on this list a little bit above Evolution just because of the dominant run they've had. They've had all the championships they've earned, which we're going to get into. and the length of the group. Obviously this group is made up of Big E, Xavier Woods, and Kofi Kingston. They've been a magical and a perfect faction since their debut in 2014. It took some time to really find what the New Day that we know and love now, but once they figured it out and once they put their mind to it, they became quickly one of the most popular factions of all time. During their long run together, they amassed countless championships, including 2 WWE championships, an Intercontinental Championship, 12 Tag Team Championships, and 1 King of the Ring run by Xavier Woods. They're the longest consecutively tenured faction on this list, which gave them a significant list on groups that were on the outside and groups that like Evolution, which had their run, which wasn't as long as the New Days is. So I gave them the run for that. I gave them a little boost because of how important their career has been to wrestling, and obviously I would love to see all 3 of them back in the ring together relatively soon. It's always hope that Big E can get cleared and Kofi can heal up and get back from his injury. But the New Day at number 4 for most important factions of all time, they're, in my opinion, probably the best faction on this list when it comes to winning and their longevity. They're probably the most best faction when it comes to that. They're the best. If you wanted to put a faction up against another faction to win a championship, to win, or whatever, a big match or whatever, the New Day would be one that you would probably pick above the next 3 on the list. Just because of how well they click as a team, how good they are, how long they've been a team, the championships they've won. They have more trust in the New Day than you do some other teams that are on the list. Speaking of other teams that are on the list, at number 3 is the Bloodline. Obviously the Bloodline have had a rough couple of weeks, months, as of this podcast. Roman Reigns, the Usos. I'm including both of them for this list just because we're talking about as a whole. We're not talking about right this second. And then Solo Sikoa and Paul Heyman have been absolutely destroying the WWE for the past 3 years. Their title reigns don't include as many as the New Day or almost any other group on this list, but their longevity of title reigns is what I gave them the edge over the New Day for. The Roman Reigns is the undisputed WWE Universal Champion at over 1,000 days, and they also have the longest reigning WWE Tag Team Champions of all time with the Usos, and they had an Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal win with Jey Uso winning. This is the newest faction that appears on this list, so its influence may not be seen as a whole when you look at the wrestling world yet, but I feel like as time goes on, you're going to see a lot of people trying to reach, the Bloodline storyline level and try to tell stories in a similar way to get, their superstars or their wrestlers to, succeed as much as they possibly can. And I think that following the Bloodline method, if you want to call it that, will be something that a lot of people, promoters and creatively will try to strive for. This was the one that I had probably the most trouble with comparing the Bloodline and the New Day. Who goes first? Do I go with the New Day with their multiple championships and how long they've been a faction? Do I prioritize that, or do I prioritize the Bloodline's dominance and storyline masterpieces that they've been able to put together? In the end, obviously, I went with the Bloodline because I think that when you talk about important, I feel like a lot of people will look at the Bloodline and their stories and they will try to emulate it and try to use it to help their own people. And I think that having the Bloodline at 3, New Day at 4, gives them both the respect that they deserve, and then shows that the Bloodline's importance is going to be long lasting. It could even be number 1 on this list, but because we're still in the middle of all the Bloodline story and everything, I didn't want to push it up too far. I thought 3 was a nice middle of the road number that I was comfortable with, so I decided to put them there. So that's why I have the Bloodline at number 3. At number 2, the runner-up in this top 5 list, I put the Shield. This one is almost strictly due to the 3 members that made up the Shield. The Shield single-handedly gave us the best champion in the modern era, and Roman Reigns, one of the greatest wrestlers in the world, and Seth Rollins, and one of the most brutal wrestlers in the world, in Dean Ambrose, who is now known as Jon Moxley. The championships for this group include 2 Universal Championships, 2 Intercontinental Championships, 1 U.S. Championship, and 3 Tag Team Championships. Now, they obviously dominated their run as a team. It was one of the more impressive runs that when you look for. And they also have transformed wrestling since they've been apart as a faction. No other faction has had the quality of wrestlers and performers that the Shield has had. You know, sometimes you look at some groups and they have, you know, obviously you have like people that are, you know, tag team wrestlers and nothing more, nothing less. And you'll have, you know, the mid-card people that are never going to be the main event caliber talent compared to the other members of the group. But for the Shield, every single one, Reigns, Ambrose, and Rollins, all won world championships in WWE, are still winning world championships in whatever company they're in. And, you know, they become the 3 faces of wrestling. You know, there's, you know, we would argue that Jon Moxley is the face of AEW. Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins are the face of Monday Night Raw and Friday Night SmackDown, and the WWE as a whole. So, you know, if maybe they did not have the Shield, they might not have had the success that they would have had. You know, it's all about making a first impression, which they made a fantastic first impression when they debuted. So having them debut differently or debut separately, it might have really left a lot of meat on the bone that could have been used to propel them into superstardom over time. You know, even now you'll still have, you know, Seth Rollins talk about, you know, when he was in the Shield, and Jon Moxley and Roman Reigns, and, you know, he's mad at Roman Reigns because he's not the kind of champion he would like him to be, and Roman Reigns doesn't care what Seth Rollins thinks, and Jon Moxley's just doing his thing. But, you know, it's still very important to this day of the importance that these 3 guys have had, and their the Shield was the real starting point for making them the superstars that we know them as today. You know, it was a hard choice to put them above a lot of other groups just because their run wasn't as long as other groups. But since we're talking about importance, their importance in wrestling is immense. It is very important, very, you know, if it wasn't the Shield, there might not be a Seth Rollins, a Roman Reigns, or a Jon Moxley, you know. So their importance is probably one of the more important ones on the list in terms of overall importance. But for number 1, I have the most important faction in WWE history. For number 1, I put D Generation X. Why do I put D Generation X at number 1? Because simply put, without DX, WWE loses the Monday Night Wars against WCW. You know, at the same time, the NWO were running rampant on WCW, gaining tons of popularity, not only with wrestling fans, but with the mainstream media and non-wrestling fans. So having the answer to NWLB DX was a great opportunity for them and allowed for them to, showcase what they can do as a group, as well as help the WWE ultimately defeat WCW in the Monday Night Wars. The members of DX included Triple H, Shawn Michaels, The Road Dogg, Billy Gunn, X-Pac, and Chyna. During their run as a team, they amassed 4 WWF or WWE championships, 4 Intercontinental Championships, 5 European Championships, 2 Hardcore Championships, 10 Tag Team Championships, and 1 Women's Championship, which is an immense amount of championships for a group to have. But one of the main reasons that they're on this list is because without DX, there is no WWE. WWE loses possibly to WCW. So having as most influential and important factions in WWE history, having the faction that saved the WWE from losing and going bankrupt has to be number one. They have, not only that, they had a great cast of members. They won tons of championships and a wide range too. You know, the WWF, Intercontinental, European, Hardcore, Tag Team, Women's. So they kind of ran the gauntlet on different championships to win. So having them as number one was an easy decision in my book. It was, there were some difficulties in the rest of the list. Whether to put the Bloodline or the New Day at 3 and 4. The Shield, whether I want to put that at number 2 or put the Bloodline at 2, or whatever I wanted to do. This one was the easiest one to do just because its importance is very, very noticeable on the wrestling industry. Without DX, everything probably looks a lot different than what it does right now. But with DX at 1, that will do it for the top 5 list. For a rundown of the list one last time, we have Evolution at number 5, the New Day at number 4, the Bloodline at number 3, the Shield at number 2, and DX at number 1. Let me know what you think and if you agree. Also, let me know what your top 5 would be. Let me know other ideas you have for top 5 and anything else you might want me to cover related to a top 5. I'm always open to ideas, so be sure to let me know what your opinions and ideas are. Next, we're going to have our weekly roundup. We'll start at Monday Night Raw, which took place on June 12th. Rhea Ripley got her new WWE World Women's Championship. It's very similar to the World Heavyweight Championship, which was done to show the prestige and try to put both the men's and women's titles on equal footing, which I think it did a great job doing. It looks great. The only difference is that the men and the women's has is the color of the strap. So, overall, I think it looks great. Cody versus Dom is going to happen at Money in the Bank, which is going to be exciting. It's going to be, that London crowd is going to pop a lot. They're going to boo a lot. It's going to be a very fun match overall. Cody Rhodes beat The Miz in a great match. Becky Lynch beat Chelsea Green. Damian Priest qualifies for Money in the Bank over Riddle. Seth Rollins announces an open challenge for next week, which will be this coming show. KO and Sammy retain their tag team championships against Imperium. Seth Rollins versus Finn Balor is made official for Money in the Bank, which is going to be interesting considering it's an open challenge. So we'll see who accepts the challenge, and we will go from there. Be backstage. Finn Balor once again has a talk with JD McDonough, and the advertisement for Logan Paul returning was shown. He's on his way back next week, which is now this week. We'll see what's next for him. So overall, I think this was a good show. You know, the most important things about this show: Damian Priest qualifying for Money in the Bank. I thought that was the right call. Finn Balor versus Seth Rollins at Money in the Bank for the World Heavyweight Championship. That's going to be a very important match. I think it's going to be a great match. They had a great match for the last spot for the finals in the tournament. So I think running it back was a great idea. Next, we're going to move on to NXT from June 13th. So NXT Gold Rush will be the next 2 weeks. Schism loses their opening match against Wesley, Tyler Bate, and Mustafa Ali. Which sets up the question, what is next for Schism? You know, we still have the looming dyad departure from the WWE. So we have to see what they decide to do creatively coming up. Seth Rollins versus Braun Breaker for the World Heavyweight Championship this Tuesday is going to be probably the match of the week, in my opinion, compared to everything that I've seen. I'm very excited for it. I think Braun Breaker is going to show how great he is, and Seth Rollins coming back to NXT is always something to notice. But on the other hand, the ending seems to be quite, I don't want to say obvious, but noticeable if you look at it. Sorry, excuse me. Baron Corbin, he defeated Ilya Dragunov, and during that match, Braun Breaker cost him his chance at winning, which would ultimately looks like it'll lead to Dragunov costing Breaker the World Heavyweight Championship on NXT. In 2 weeks, we will have Corbin versus Carmelo Hayes and Thea Hale versus Tiffany Stratton for the championships. Wesley, Tyler Bate with special guest referee Mustafa Ali next week for the North American Championship. We have Humberto Carrillo and Angel Garza. They make their NXT return. They're back. They're on NXT looking for the tag team championships. That's very exciting. I think Carrillo and Garza, I love them. I think they're fantastic talents. I loved Humberto when he was originally he made his run, his his first main roster run when he was, I think it was for the US Championship. He was always in matches for. I thought he was fantastic when I watched him there. I don't know why they kind of went away from it. I mean, his character wasn't flushed out as other guys, but I think he had a lot of momentum, and I think that he was really good at what he did, and he was obviously very talented. So I think that if they just could have stuck with it maybe a little bit longer, or just try some small things to get fans more on his side, it would have worked great. But this is great for him too. I'm very excited for him. And the big thing of note, or the last big thing of note from this show, is Thea Hale beats Cora Jade, which shows that she can be a top tier talent, which is something that she needed before facing up against Tiffany Stratton. So it was a great episode of NXT. There was a lot of NXT Gold Rush action, making the matches and some surprises along the way with Carrillo and Garza. But overall, I thought it was a great show. AEW Dynamite from June 14th. Adam Cole and MJF, they opened the show to a time limit draw at an all-time classic match. If you haven't watched it, make sure you do. It was a great match. Great. Everything about it was great. It was a fantastic show, both of them. You had the possible match coming up of Darby Allin and Sting versus Sammy Guevara and Chris Jericho. It was the first time, you had Chris Jericho and Sting in the ring, which was very exciting. Wardlow retained his TNT Championship against Jake Hager, which did not last long after that. Tony Storm retains against Sky Blue, but Sky Blue had an awesome match. Zack Sabre Jr. challenged Orange Cassidy, as well as what was made official was Orange Cassidy and Shibata versus Sabre Jr. and Daniel Garcia this coming Wednesday. So that's going to be a great match. Sabre Jr. and Orange Cassidy are going to have a great match if they make that official. So now they're left open a open challenge for the IWGP Heavyweight Championship at Forbidden Door. It was accepted by Jungle Boy, which was an interesting choice. I thought there were other great choices like Jay White, or maybe even wanted to go crazy and do like a Samoa Joe or something. There were definitely options that would have made great sense too, but Jungle Boy gives him a great chance to show what he can do. And on a big stage like this as well is going to be great for him. Hiroshi Tanahashi versus MJF is set for Forbidden Door. The main event, the Elite beat the Blackpool Combat Club, which ends in a chaotic ending with Eddie Kingston making his AEW television return, Kenny Omega making his AEW television return, only to be attacked by Will Ospreay making his AEW television return, and leaving Kenny Omega in a mess in the middle of the ring as the show ended. Overall, I thought this was a great show. A lot of Forbidden Door stuff, which was very exciting. Didn't expect to see Zack Sabre Jr. Didn't expect for a Sonata Open Challenge or Hiroshi Tanahashi versus MJF. Didn't expect that to get made official yet. The MJF Adam Cole match was a classic match. Ends in a draw, so it'll be interesting to see what happens in that feud from going on from here. We could probably get more insight coming on this Wednesday. Friday Night SmackDown, covering the main points. We have Pretty Deadly becoming the number one contender for the Tag Team Championships. They win the Gauntlet match, which was a very good Gauntlet match, very stacked, a lot of great teams in there. They are the number one contenders. I think they get their shot. I think it's this upcoming week, I think. We have Io Sky accepting a challenge for Bayley to put her Money in the Bank ladder match entrant spot on the line against Shotzi, which is interesting. It adds to the damage control fall of it all. They've had the Grayson Waller effect with Charlotte Flair, which was then interrupted by Bianca Belair, who said that she wants her title shot. So it'd be interesting to see where this goes. Maybe we get a heel Bianca sometime relatively soon. We'll have to wait and see, but I think that's a very likely possibility going forward. And then the main, I guess you can call it a main event. What will Jay do? Is what is his choice this week? Will he officially side with the Bloodline like he almost did last week, or will he side with his brother even after everything from last week's show? Ultimately, Jey Uso super kicks Roman Reigns, which sets up for the Usos and Roman Reigns and Solo Sikoa at Money in the Bank. The Usos are united. The Bloodline's in shambles. Roman and Solo are the only members left that are not Paul Heyman. So it'll be interesting to see where they go from here. Does Solo stick with Roman Reigns throughout the Money in the Bank match, or does he slowly start to rejoin with Jimmy and Jay? We'll have to see. It was a great show. Everything about these shows this week have been great. And normally this would be it. This would be the last show, but this is not the last show. We have AEW Collision Its debut episode opened the show with CM Punk. He takes promo shots at the Elite and their fans. It was a great promo. Missed hearing him talk, missed hearing him run his mouth, and he did a great job. He still says he is the guy. We will have to wait and see if he is the guy. Especially we'll have to see after his main event, see if he even wins that. Luchasaurus is the new TNT champion after defeating Wardlow. I do not understand why they gave Wardlow the championship again to have him lose super quickly. I feel like it did him more harm than good, and they're going to have to, shelve the Arn Anderson thing and figure something else out because, that went downhill fast. He was supposed to have a great run with Arn Anderson and, do tons of great things, and that was supposed to revitalize him. Obviously, it did not do as much as he would have hoped, or the company would have hoped, and they gave it to Luchasaurus. We're going to have to see what's coming next. Hopefully, it's something good for Wardlow. Maybe another match with Luchasaurus. Maybe it's a stipulation match. We'll see. But I just don't understand why you would give him the title from Powerhouse Hobbs, who didn't have the title that long either, just to give it to Luchasaurus. It doesn't make any sense. Andrade made his return and had a great match with Buddy Matthews, featuring a post-match attack by the House of Black. I'm very excited for that storyline in particular. I think that Malachi Black and Andrade can have some great matches. I think Buddy Matthews and Andrade can keep having matches like this, and I think that if they can keep that up, it'll be a fantastic storyline to, lead the way in AEW Collision's history. Miro returned to beat Tony Nese. Not as many theatrics or close calls as in this match. It was a Miro one-sided beatdown. It was great to see him back. The crowd was very excited for him. And then we get to the main event where we had CMFTR defeat Jay White, Juice Robinson, and Samoa Joe. It was a fantastic match. CM Punk wasn't in it too long. It was mostly an FTR match with CM Punk getting some spots and getting some action. Obviously, he gets the pinfall victory because it's in Chicago. But I thought it was a fantastic match. I thought it was a fantastic opening show. The crowd, they really cheered hard for when Samoa Joe and Punk were in the same ring. So I think that they'll probably go forward with that, as that was the report. That it was going to be something with either Jay White, Samoa Joe in that area. They were all here. The crowd cheered loudest when there was Samoa Joe and CM Punk in the ring at the same time. I think that's where they'll go. It was a great debut episode for AEW Collision. And all the shows this week were very, very excellent. I was very pleased by the week of shows. There was not really any week show, honestly. So, sometimes you have like one or two shows a week that, just don't live up to your expectations, But Monday Night Raw was great. NXT was great with all the news and happenings for NXT Gold Rush. AEW Dynamite was good with all the news and happenings for Forbidden Door and Adam Cole versus MJF. SmackDown was great. It had the implosion of the Bloodline completely. It had great matches throughout. And then AEW Collision, obviously with the return of CM Punk, a title change for the TNT Championship. Andrade and Miro making their return was great. Even Samoa Joe, seeing him again. You don't always see him that much on AEW TV. That was great. But that just about does it here. I want to thank you all for listening. Let me know what you think of this episode, the top 5, the weekly roundup. Let me know what you think. Make sure you follow on Twitter at Unbotchable, Instagram at Unbotchable, and Facebook at Bryant Niles. Subscribe on YouTube and Spotify. And as always, stay off the top rope.